Chapter 3 Over the Bar. The days and the nights went by, and the Ethne fled north across the Sea of Morning Opals, north toward the equator. They were far out of the trade lanes. All these vast upper reaches were wilderness. There were not even fishing villages along the coast. The great cliffs rose sheer from the water, and nothing could find a foothold there. And beyond, past the dragon's throat, lay only the barren death-trap of the upper seas. The Ethne ran as sweetly as though she joyed to be free again, free of the muddy harbor and the chains. And a change came over Heath. He was a man again. He stood shaved and clean and erect on his own deck, and there was no decision to be made any more, no doubt. The long dread, the long delay, were over, and he too, in his own bitter way, was happy. They had seen nothing more of the Lahal, but Heath knew quite well that she was there somewhere, following. She was not as fleet as the Ethne, but she was sound, and Johor was a good sailor. Moreover, the priest Vacor was there, and he would drive the Lahal over the mountains of white cloud, if he had to catch them. He said once to Aelor, "Vacor seems to have a special hatred for you." Her face twisted with revulsion and remembered shame. "He is a beast," she said. "He is a serpent, a lizard that walks like a king." She added, "We've made it easy for him, the three of us together, like this." From where he sat steering, Heath looked at her with a remote curiosity. She stood long-legged, bold-mouthed, looking back with somber, smoky eyes at the white wake unrolling behind them. He said, "You must have loved Broca to break your vows for him, considering what it means if they catch you." Aelor looked at him, then laughed, a brief sound that had no humor in it. "I'd have gone with any man strong enough to take me out of the temple," she said, "and Broca is strong, and he worships me." Heath was genuinely astonished. "You don't love him?" She shrugged. "He is good to look at. He is a chief of warriors, and he is a man and not a priest. But love—" She asked suddenly, "What is it like to love as you loved your Ethne?" He started. "What do you know about Ethne?" he asked harshly. "You have talked of her in sleep, and Broca told me how you called her shadow in Kalruna's place. You dared the moonfire to gain her back." She glanced at the ivory figurehead on the high curving bow, the image of a woman, young and slim and smiling. "I think you are a fool," she said abruptly. "I think only a fool would love a shadow." She had left him and gone down into the cabin before he could gather words, before he could take her white neck between his hands and break it. Ethne, Ethne. He cursed the woman of the temple gardens. He was still in a brooding fury when Broca came up out of the cabin to relieve him at the sweep. "I'll steer a while yet," Heath told him curtly. "I think the weather's going to break." Clouds were boiling up in the south as the night closed down. The sea was running in long, easy swells, as it had done for all these days, but there was a difference, a pulse and a stir that quivered all through the ship's keel. Broca, stretching huge shoulders, looked away to the south and then down at Heath. "I think you talk too much to my woman," he said. Before Heath could answer, the other laid his hand lightly on the Earthman's shoulder. A light grip, but with strength enough behind it to crack Heath's bones. He said, "Do not talk so much to Aelor." "I haven't sought her out," he snapped savagely. "She's your woman. You worry about her." "I am not worried about her," Broca answered calmly. "Not about her and you." He was looking down at Heath as he spoke, and Heath knew the contrast they made. His own lean body and gaunt face against the big barbarian's magnificent strength. "But she is always with you on the deck, listening to your stories of the sea," said Broca. "Do not talk to her so much," he repeated, and this time there was an edge to his voice. "For heaven's sake," said Heath jeeringly, "if I'm a fool, what are you? A man mad enough to look for power in the moonfire and faithfulness in a temple wench, and now you're jealous." He hated both Broca and Aelor bitterly in this moment, and out of his hate he spoke. "Wait until the moonfire touches you. It will break your strength and your pride. After that, you won't care who your woman talks to or where." Broca gave him a stare of unmoved contempt. Then he turned his back and settled down to look out across the darkening sea. After a while, the amusing side of the whole thing struck Heath, and he began to laugh. They were, all three of them, going to die. Somewhere out there to the south, Vacor came like a black shepherd, driving them toward death. Dreams of empire, dreams of glory, and a voyage that tempted the vengeance of the gods. And at such a time, the barbarian chief could be jealous. With sudden shock, he realized just how much time Aelor had spent with him. Out of habit and custom, as old as the sea, he had helped to while away the long hard hours with the sailors' yarns. Looking back, he could see Aelor's face, strangely young and eager as she listened, could remember how she asked questions and wanted to learn the ways and the working of the ship. He could remember now how beautiful she looked with the wind in her hair, her firm, strong body holding the Ethne steady in a quartering sea. The storm brewed over the hours, and at last it broke. Heath had known that the sea of morning opals would not let him go without a struggle. It had tried him with shallows, with shifting reefs, with dead calms and booming solar tides, and all the devices of current, fog, and drifting weed. He had beaten all of them. Now he was almost within sight of the dragon's throat, the gateway to the upper seas, and it was a murderous moment for a storm out of the south. The night had turned black. The sea burned with white phosphorescence, a boiling cauldron of witchfire. The wind was frightening. The Ethne plunged and staggered, driving under a bare pole, and for once Heath was glad of Broca's strength as they fought the sweep together. He became aware that someone was beside him, and knew that it was Aelor. "Go below!" he yelled, and caught only the echo of her answer. She did not go, but threw her weight, too, against the sweep. Lightning bolts as broad as comets' tails came streaking down with the rush and a fury, as though they had started their run from another star and gathered speed across half the galaxy. They lit the sea of morning opals with a purple glare until the thunder brought the darkness crashing down again. Then the rain fell like a river rolling down the belts of cloud. Heath groaned inwardly. The wind and the following sea had taken the little ship between them and were hurling her forward. At the speed she was making now, she would hit the dragon's throat at dawn. She would hit it full tilt and helpless as a drifting chip. The lightning showed him the barbarian's great straining body, gleaming wet, his long hair, torn loose from its knots and chains, streaming with wind and water. It showed him Aelor, too. Their hands and their shoulders touched, straining together. It seemed that they struggled on that way for centuries, and then, abruptly, the rain stopped, the wind slackened, and there was a period of eerie silence. Aelor's voice sounded loud in Heath's ears, crying, "Is it over?" "No," he answered. "Listen." They heard a deep and steady booming, distant in the north, the boom of surf. The storm began again. Dawn came, hardly lighter than the night. Through the flying wrack, Heath could see cliffs on either side, where the mountain ranges narrowed in, funneling the sea of morning opals into the strait of the dragon's throat. The driven sea ran high between them, bursting white against a black rock. The Ethne was carried headlong, a leaf in a millrace. The cliffs drew in and in until there was a gap of no more than a mile between them. Black, brooding Titans, and the space below, a fury of white water, torn and shredded by fang-like rocks. The dragon's throat. When he had made the passage before, Heath had had fair weather and men for the oars. Even then it had not been easy. Now he tried to remember where the channel lay, tried to force the ship toward what seemed to be an open lane among the rocks. The Ethne gathered speed and shot forward into the dragon's throat. She fled through a blind insanity of spray and wind and sound. Time and again Heath saw the loom of a towering rock before him and wrenched the ship aside or fought to keep away from death that was hidden just under the boiling surface. Twice, 3 times, the Ethne gave a grating shudder and he thought she was gone. Once, toward the last, when it seemed that there was no hope, he felt Aelor's hand close over his. The high water saved them, catching them in its own rush down the channel, carrying them over the rocks, and finally over the bar at the end of the gut. The Ethne came staggering out into the relative quiet of the upper seas, where the pounding waves seemed gentle, and it was all done so quickly, over so soon. For a long time the 3 of them stood sagging over the sweep, not able to realize that it was over, and they still lived. The storm spent itself, the wind settled to a steady blow. Heath got a rag of sail up. Then he sat down by the tiller and bowed his head over his knees and thought about how Aelor had caught his hand when she believed she was going to die.